I wasn't a superstitious person. I didn't believe in ghosts, curses, or any of that stuff. I was just a regular guy trying to make overtime pay so I could fix my truck. But what I experienced in that warehouse between 2 and 4:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in November changed everything I thought I knew about the world. My name is Danny Reeves, and 7 months ago, I worked the graveyard shift at the Riverside Distribution Center off Route 17 in southern Kentucky. I was stacking shrink-wrapped pallets near the loading dock when I heard the familiar hydraulic whine of a Crown forklift starting up somewhere deep in the east aisle. That sound wasn't unusual. We had 6 of them in the building, and sometimes they activated on motion sensors for automated inventory sweeps. I kept working, my radio crackling with nothing but static as it usually did past midnight. The fluorescent lights above me buzzing with that particular frequency that makes your temples throb. The warehouse was massive, over 300,000 square feet of concrete floors and metal shelving that stretched up toward the ceiling like the ribs of some giant sleeping beast. I'd been working the graveyard shift there for 3 months, ever since my old job at the auto shop fell through, and by now, I'd gotten used to the particular rhythm of the night shift, the way the building seemed to settle and creak after midnight, the occasional distant sound of rats scurrying through the drop ceiling tiles above me, the specific smell of cardboard and industrial cleaner that never quite left my clothes, no matter how many times I washed them. My supervisor, Gerald, always said the night shift was the easiest, that all I had to do was keep the aisles clear and make sure nothing caught fire, and for the most part, he was right. Most nights were boring, just me and my thoughts and the endless hum of machinery in standby mode, and I was fine with that, because boring meant safe and meant a steady paycheck. But then I noticed something strange. The forklift wasn't doing the normal thing. Instead of moving to a rack and lifting a pallet like it always did during these night runs, it turned slowly, almost deliberately, and began rolling down the main corridor toward the center of the building where I was standing. I told myself it was just recalibrating, running some kind of diagnostic path, so I walked to the break room to refill my coffee. When I came back, I could see it clearly through the gaps in the shelving. A yellow forklift with no driver, its forks pointed forward like antennae, rolling along at exactly my walking speed, as if it were pacing me. I stopped, and it stopped. I took a step back, and it reversed, just slightly, keeping that same precise distance between us. My first thought was that I was seeing things, that the bad lighting and my tired eyes were playing some kind of tricks on me. But then I watched it for a full 30 seconds without moving, and the forklift just sat there, idling, its engine running smooth and steady like someone had their foot on the accelerator. The east aisle stretched out behind it, dark and empty, and there was no sign of anyone walking toward it or climbing aboard. I set my coffee down on a crate nearby, my hands starting to get that tingling sensation they always got when my adrenaline kicked in, and I made a decision. I was going to walk over to that forklift and figure out what was going on, because there had to be a logical explanation. There always was. And I wasn't the kind of guy who let his imagination run away with him in an empty warehouse at 2 a.m. I started walking toward the forklift, my boots echoing on the concrete floor, and I got about halfway there before I realized something was off. The forklift wasn't where I'd last seen it. It had moved again, rolling back another 20 feet into the deeper shadows of the east aisle, as if retreating from my approach. I stopped, and the forklift stopped, and I stood there in the silence of that enormous building, feeling something cold settle into my chest that I couldn't explain. Lord, I thought, not knowing why that word came to me first. Help me understand what I'm seeing. I wasn't a religious man, hadn't been to church since my grandmother's funeral 8 years ago, but in that moment, I found myself whispering a half-remembered prayer under my breath. Something about being afraid, but not alone. And the words felt ridiculous leaving my mouth, but also somehow necessary. Like speaking them out loud might make the situation more real and therefore more manageable. The forklift sat there in the darkness, its yellow paint almost glowing in the dim light. And I watched it for a long moment before I made my next move. I turned around and walked briskly toward the emergency exit by receiving Bay 3, the one that led directly to the parking lot where my truck was waiting. I never used that door because it required a key card after hours, and the alarm would blast if you opened it without authorization. But I figured I'd try it anyway and deal with the consequences later, because right then, the only thing I cared about was getting outside and getting away from whatever was happening in that aisle. I reached the door and pulled out my key card, swiping it through the reader, but the light stayed red and the door didn't budge. I swiped again and again, my heart now pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. The red light on the card reader was blinking steadily. That was normal. But as I reached for the handle, I looked down through the narrow window in the door, and that's when I saw it. The forklift, parked directly in front of the exit, its forks raised slightly off the ground, like two blunt fingers pointing at the sky. It had gotten there before me. I didn't understand how that was possible, since I'd walked a straight line from the east aisle, and the forklift had been behind me. But there it was, blocking the only direct route to the outside world, with my truck sitting just beyond it in the dark parking lot. I backed away from the door slowly, not wanting to take my eyes off the forklift. And that's when I started thinking about the other exits. The main entrance at the front of the building, that was an option, and there was always the security office nearby where I could try to raise someone on the radio or the intercom. I pulled out my phone to call my supervisor, Gerald, but the screen showed no signal despite the 3 bars I'd had earlier. And when I tried to send a text, the message just sat there spinning, trying to connect to a network that suddenly seemed very far away. Lord, give me strength, I thought, because the situation was escalating in ways I didn't like, and I could feel my hands starting to shake as I walked back into the warehouse, proper, past the security office with its always dark monitors, toward the front entrance where the revolving doors would at least let me see what was waiting outside. When I pushed through them, my heart sinking, I could see the forklift's silhouette through the warehouse windows, parked perfectly in front of the only unlocked vehicle gate. And I knew right then that this wasn't a malfunction or a glitch, or anything I could explain with logic. This was something else entirely, and I was trapped inside a building with it. I walked back inside, my footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. And that's when I realized I hadn't heard the forklift following me this time. There was only silence, broken by the constant hum of the HVAC system and the distant drip of water somewhere in the back of the building, and I couldn't tell if that was better or worse than hearing it behind me. "Dear God," I whispered, the words coming out before I could stop them. What is this thing? I knew praying probably wouldn't help. Knew that whatever was happening had nothing to do with God or faith or anything I learned in Sunday school growing up. But I kept doing it anyway because it was the only thing that made me feel like I still had some control over my own thoughts. I made a decision then. I would walk the perimeter of the warehouse, checking every exit, every access point. And if the forklift was blocking one, I would find another. The north wall had 3 emergency doors, all alarmed, all opening to the empty lot behind the building where the dumpsters were kept. And that seemed like my best bet, because, at least out there, I would have room to run if I needed to. I started moving along the aisles, checking them one by one, and the first two doors were clear. Both of them opened outward without any resistance, and I could see the dark parking lot beyond them, my truck visible in the distance under the sodium lights. But when I reached the third door, Bay 7, my stomach dropped into my boots because the forklift was there, parked perfectly centered across the doorway, with just enough space on either side for a person to squeeze through if they were desperate enough. I wasn't there yet, I told myself. I still had other options, and I backed away from that door slowly and started moving toward the loading docks on the west side of the building, where trucks came and went throughout the day. The loading docks were my last real option, and I walked toward them with a sense of dread building in my chest that felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. The concrete ramp down to the docks was always slippery with condensation and the occasional spilled hydraulic fluid, and I stepped carefully as I descended, my eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the yellow forklift. But as I walked down that ramp toward Dock 4, my stomach dropped for the second time that night, because the forklift was already there, its yellow paint glowing under the dock lights, waiting for me like it had known I would come. It sat there in the middle of the loading area, its engine idling, its forks raised about 2 feet off the ground like it was ready to lift something. And I stood at the top of the ramp, staring at it, feeling my breath catch in my throat. Lord have mercy, I thought, because this couldn't be happening. This was the kind of thing that only happened in movies or nightmares. But here I was, wide awake in a warehouse at 3 a.m. with a machine that shouldn't be moving and had no driver and knew exactly where I was going. I turned around and walked back up the ramp, my legs starting to feel weak, and that's when the first real wave of terror hit me. It wasn't the nervous unease from before or the creeping suspicion that something was wrong. This was actual fear, the kind that makes your mouth dry and your hands shake and your mind start racing through all the worst-case scenarios until you can't think straight anymore. The forklift hadn't followed me up the ramp, and I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or worse. I stood there on that loading dock ramp, breathing hard, and I did something I should have done from the start. I really looked at the forklift. It was unit number 4, the same one Marcus used during the day shift, the one that had a slow hydraulic leak in the left fork that made it squeak every time it lifted anything heavy. I knew it was unit 4 because I'd seen Marcus drive it hundreds of times, and that distinctive squeak from the left fork was unmistakable in a building full of similar machines. But Marcus had gone home 6 hours ago, and everyone else on the day shift had left by midnight when I came on, and there was no one in that building but me. I was absolutely certain of that, because I had walked the entire perimeter when I started my shift, checking all the emergency exits and making sure no one was still hiding in the break room or the locker area, like sometimes happened when guys fell asleep on their breaks. I walked back down the ramp slowly, approaching the forklift with a mix of fear and curiosity that I couldn't quite explain. And as I got closer, I could see that the driver's seat was empty, the seatbelt hanging loose, the small dashboard dark except for the green power indicator light that was blinking steadily. There was nothing there, no one controlling it, no remote device or visible mechanism that would explain how it was moving. And I reached out and touched the cold metal of its fork just to make sure it was real. The forklift's motor revved suddenly, loudly, making me jump backward and nearly fall over a stacked crate nearby. I scrambled away from it, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples, and I watched as the forklift began rolling toward me at a slow but steady pace, its fork still raised at that same unsettling height. I turned and ran without thinking, my feet pounding on the concrete as I made a beeline for the nearest aisle, weaving between racks and ducking under overhead conveyors and vaulting over stacked pallets whenever I couldn't find a clear path. The forklift followed at a constant distance, never gaining, never falling behind, always maintaining that precise gap between us, as if it was programmed to stay just close enough to keep me terrified, but not close enough to actually catch me. God, I prayed silently, tears forming in my eyes. Please help me find a way out of this. I ducked behind a massive rack of boxed electronics near the center of the building, pressing my back against the cardboard and trying to quiet my breathing. I could hear the forklift's motor idling nearby, feel the vibration through the floor, and I knew with absolute certainty that it knew exactly where I was hiding. I crouched there for what felt like an eternity, my legs cramping and my lungs burning, and I whispered every prayer I could remember from my grandmother's lap in that small Baptist church back in Hazard County where I grew up. "The Lord is my shepherd," I recited silently, "though I shall not want," and the words felt hollow, but also strangely comforting, like a thread connecting me to something bigger than this nightmare. I kept waiting for the forklift to round the corner and come for me, but it never did. Instead, I heard its motor idling steadily as it moved around nearby, searching or waiting or doing whatever it was designed to do. I don't know how long I crouched there, but eventually I noticed the sky outside turning gray, the first pale hints of dawn bleeding through the high windows, and the automatic lights flickering on one by one as the dawn cycle began. I had never been so grateful for that stupid lighting system in my entire life, and I whispered a prayer of thanks to God for small mercies as I slowly stood up, my legs aching and stiff from being crouched for so long. I stood up slowly, my joints popping audibly, and I looked around the corner of the rack with my heart still pounding in my chest. The forklift was gone. I didn't understand where it had gone or how it could have moved without me hearing it. But when I walked out from behind the rack into the main aisle, I could see that the space was empty, just concrete and shelving, and the distant hum of machinery coming back to life for the day shift. I walked to the nearest exit, a side door that led to the employee lot, and I pushed it open with shaking hands, stepping out into the cold pre-dawn air where I could finally breathe. The morning shift was just arriving, cars pulling into the lot with their headlights cutting through the early mist, and I saw Gerald's truck parked in its usual spot near the main entrance. I walked toward it, feeling like a man who had just survived something he couldn't explain, ready to tell Gerald everything and quit on the spot and never come back to this place. But as I approached, I saw Marcus getting out of his car, that easy grin on his face as always, and he waved at me when he noticed me walking over. Lord, I thought, at least I'm not alone anymore. "Hey, Danny," he said, grabbing his lunch pail from the passenger seat. "You hear about Unit 4? The question hit me like a punch to the gut, and I stopped walking, my mouth going dry. Marcus told me the maintenance crew had found it that morning, parked in the center of the warehouse with its forks raised, pointed directly at the break room door, like it was waiting for someone to come out. Gerald said it was probably a software glitch, some corrupted navigation command from the automated inventory system, and he had tech support coming in later that week to run diagnostics and fix whatever was wrong. I nodded and said, "Yeah, that made sense. Probably just a glitch." But I never went back to that warehouse after my shift ended that morning. I never answered Gerald's calls, never returned to finish out the week. And I never told anyone the whole truth about what happened to me in that building between 2 and 4:30 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. I got my answer 3 weeks later when I was sitting in my apartment watching the news, and a story came on that made my blood run cold. The Riverside Distribution Center had burned to the ground overnight. A massive fire that crews from 3 counties had fought for hours. The building was a total loss, and the fire marshal was calling it suspicious. But what really made me lean forward was this. Investigators had found something in the ashes, something welded to the concrete floor beneath where Unit 4 had been parked, something they were describing only as anomalous. I turned off the television and sat in the dark for a long time after that. And I still don't know what it means that the building is gone, but the question isn't. I wonder sometimes what that thing was, what it was connected to, why that forklift was tracking me in the first place. My grandmother used to tell me that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again, and I think about that now more than ever. I've moved on with my life, stopped working nights, but sometimes when I'm lying in bed and the darkness feels too thick, I still hear that hydraulic whine starting up somewhere in the distance. And I pray, Lord, I pray that whoever is out there facing something like this, they find their way out before the sun goes down.